Okay, so it's day 13 in the morning. Big day today. Day 12 was kind of didn't really happen, to be honest, because I had a lot of other jobs to do. We had some new masters in for the Resistance, and I had to do some box art and things like that. So it kind of got me away from the shipyard for a day, which I didn't really want to do, but it's done now, and I'm back in here. This is the frame top section for the central part of the hull. This gives you an idea of scale. It kind of brings it home, really. So if you put, say, a normal penknife in there, it gives you an idea of, it's 1.6 meters, and this is just the middle of the ship. So I've built this morning. I mean, this is fairly straightforward. It's a 3mm sheet of acrylic, and then on top of that, 2 aluminium L bars with some joins in there. Very simple, to be honest. It's always a good idea when you're doing structural work not to rely on glue. If you can do mechanical fixings like that on something this big, then it's always good for strength, to be honest. So, you know, now that's done, the threads have super glue in them to really lock them in so they won't come undone. There's also these partitions here. These have just been glue gunned in. Glue gun's a really good tool for building big things. It's quite crude, but it does fill gaps, and it's good for the impatient character. And it's pretty solid. It works very well on foam core, which is what these are in here, and acrylic, because it literally melts onto the acrylic and it sticks really nicely. So for both of those materials, it's a really good thing to use for speed if you're not going to see it, because obviously it's messy, that leaves all sorts of residue and things like that. Today I'm going to be sticking on these parts first. Those onto the outer sides of this, they just clip on, and then trying to align that with the drive shaft all the way along the edge, that might be quite tricky, but we'll find out how that goes. So I'm going to get on with that, and I'll check in later once I've done a bit more. Okay, I've applied all the side doors to the top deck. Not a particularly difficult job. They clipped on very nicely. This is part of the top decking CC here. They just clip on around the side, and then it was just a case of lining them all up. Quite a tight fit in some cases, but it worked. So they're all on. It's actually a very close, and get down here. See, it's actually very precise. They all line up very nicely. So that's done. So now I'm building the top section, which has got the armour plates, but at the moment I need to fill in this lip here, so I'm doing it with mount board and foam core, which these little holes cut in just to fit over the screw heads. So once that's done, I can start laying the tiles to do some of the detail on the exposed areas of the top deck. The gun turret goes at the back here, so I won't be tiling that because the gun turret mount goes on top of that. So once I've done that, I'm going to start working on the supports and basically work my way down across the whole of the centre of the ship. Okay, we're getting near the end of day 13 now. When I was unboxing all of the armour cladding panels, I realised that, to be honest, there was such a huge number of parts, and they're all fairly similar in some cases up close. It was going to be very hard to keep track of what I was using and to be able to pick them from somewhere. So essentially I've built myself a little holder to hold all of these, and these are all the different panels that will be going on the hull. This can then sit in the corner of the shipyard, and I can literally pick parts from there. Sorting out stuff is half the battle when you've got this many components to deal with. So I'm going to move that off the ship because it's currently actually sat on the ship. That's a lot of weight, and it's holding it quite nicely, which is a good thing. So from here, I'm going to start laying some tiles on the front of the ship up here, and then I'm going to move on to continually assembling the rest of the ship from the rest of the parts back there. So I'll check in a bit. Okay, so it's just before lunchtime on day 14. And as you can see, we now have something that looks like it might be a piece of spaceship at last. I knew that the actual assembly process of anything is usually the quickest part of a build like this, especially when there's so much resin to clean up. Since that's all been done pretty much, that does make life a lot easier from now on. So you'll probably see the ship will start to take shape quite fast. I ended up having to make quite a big decision yesterday in that I've decided to not motorise all of the doors. When actually playing around with the thing, it's a shame because the casting and the alignment was so precise that the drive shaft actually did line up and work all the way along the whole length. It just lined up perfectly without being fitted to fit. So that was good, and the design worked there. Where it didn't work, and where, to be honest, I'd made some errors, was that it was just too tight with the tolerances in terms of the fact that you had like 8 doors being driven by the drive shaft, and if just one single gear was out of place, then the entire thing wouldn't work. So in the end, I decided it was just too much of a risk to build a system that was that prone to failure, because this is going to go to a lot of shows this year with us, this ship. It's something that needs to work. Every single show needs to be repairable at the show as well if anything goes wrong. So this being all internal, once it was all sealed away, if something had broken, it was a case of, oh, how do you fix that? And in the end, I just decided, no, it's going to be easier to just have them manually moved and magnetised up, so you could have them raised or lowered. That way, we can open independent doors as well, rather than have to open them all at once, which is a good thing. The other side of things is that I'm fully aware that time is moving on quite quickly. I'm almost halfway through the build in terms of time available, and I don't really have half a spaceship yet. I mean, I think the rest of the assembly shouldn't go too badly. It's Thursday today, and hopefully by Monday it should be looking like a spaceship. That's the plan, and that'll give me sort of just under 2 weeks to actually get it painted, because it'd be a shame to have to rush the paint job. I don't really want to do that, so I'd like to get the build finished, and not having the motor drive means I don't have to worry about the electronics for motors, the mounts for motors, all those kind of things. So ultimately, we spent some money on all of the parts, and we're going to have to leave them out, which is a shame, but it's important in jobs like this to decide when not to do things as much as it is when to do things, because sometimes you kind of go down this route and you think, oh, I must do it because I've designed it that way. Sometimes you just have to go, no, that's it, enough. So we're not doing the driven doors, but we are doing the lighting, which I'm going to be doing probably tomorrow. Today, I've laid out all of the tiles on the front section here. These went together really nicely, needed a little bit of preparation to make them all fit perfectly, but it's pretty accurate, and it's nice to see that it's gone together so well. This section here is mostly going to be covered by the top hangar, which will hold all the things like light dropships and fighters and stuff like that. It's basically a launch, like a traditional runway almost, for those kind of aircraft. So this is mostly going to be covered up by that, but you'll still be able to see in the front, so it's important to have the detail go back quite a long way. Now I've done this, today I'm going to be building the housing and the turret, the housing for the turret and the turret. The mass driver turret is huge. It's like sort of this big. I've been quite looking forward to building that because it's the big gun. Everybody likes building a big gun. So I'm going to be getting on with that. Basically, I'm going to be laying up foam core as the base. Good building material, foam core, easy to work with, rigid, holds its dimensions really well, as long as you don't paint directly on top of it. But I'll be painting on resin. Painting directly on top of foam core causes it to warp, because when the paint dries it shrinks, so you can't have any of it exposed. But the idea here is the entire exterior of the ship will all be resin, and all be highly detailed, so I don't need to worry about that. So I can use it to build all of these segments. So it's going to be a fun day. It's only 11 o'clock in the morning, so I've got a lot of time left. I've been in since, I usually get in at about 7:30, 7:45 and start on these things. So I'll be working until late again. Hopefully we'll check in later on with something that looks like a turret with any luck. So I better get on with that, and I'll check in later on.